Hey friends, it's Jimmy with a reminder to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell and turn on all notifications. Also, please take a moment to quickly drop a comment saying where you're listening from since it helps me out a ton in the algorithm. In the sprawling, sun-drenched suburbs of Claremont, Florida, manicured lawns often conceal the quiet desperations of the families living within them. On Sandy Pines Road, a 5-acre property sat under the heavy, humid air of central Florida, appearing to the outside world as a slice of semi-rural paradise. But beneath the surface, quite literally, lay a secret encased in concrete and buried under the ashes of a fire pit. It was here, in March 2018, that the facade of Lori Shaver's life finally cracked. For nearly 3 years, she had lived on this property with her children and a new partner, hosting parties and building a future. Little did they know this was all occurring while the decomposing remains of her husband, Michael Shaver, lay just feet beneath the soles of her shoes. The discovery of Michael's body launched a legal saga involving digital impersonation, a wedding held over a grave, and a defense strategy that left a courtroom gasping. This is a story about the lengths to which a person will go to curate a reality, and the chilling ability to maintain a lie while literally building a life on top of the truth. Michael Shaver was a monorail technician at Walt Disney World, a job requiring precision and reliability. By all accounts from his co-workers, Michael was a man of routine. He showed up and got the job done. In the ecosystem of Disney's transportation network, he was a known quantity. He married Lori, his high school sweetheart. They met in the 7th grade, a detail Lori would later reminisce about on the witness stand. To the casual observer, they were a typical family unit. Yet, the fissures were forming long before the fatal shot. The transformation of a childhood romance into a lethal trap suggests a slow erosion of trust, replaced by a toxicity that would eventually consume them both. The timeline of the tragedy anchors itself in November 2015. Michael Shaver simply stopped showing up. His co-workers at Disney were the first to notice. Then came the text message. A message sent from Michael's phone stated abruptly that he was quitting and that they could, quote, keep all his tools. For a technician, tools are a livelihood, an investment of thousands of dollars. To abandon them was to abandon one of his biggest investments. The message raised immediate red flags. It was a chaotic gesture attributed to a steady man. Simultaneously, Michael's family felt the chill of his absence. When they reached out, they received hostile texts or Facebook messages from Michael's account. He told them to leave him alone, and a narrative of a disgruntled husband fleeing domesticity for a fresh start quickly formed and would be accepted by everyone for a time. However, if Michael had truly left to begin a new life, he would need cold, hard cash. Yet his bank accounts remained frozen. There was no withdrawal of funds, no credit card activity, no digital footprint of a man moving through the world. There was only the digital phantom, typing angry messages from an IP address that traced back to his own home, where he apparently no longer was. I guess Lori didn't know about VPNs. It was a different time. Between November 2015 and February 2018, Lori Shaver lived 2 lives. Prosecutors argued this was clear evidence of her consciousness of guilt. She began dating, eventually moving a new man, Travis Filmer, into the home she had shared with Michael. She told people Michael was a deadbeat, a stalker, or in jail. The cruelty of the impersonation was most acute in how it targeted Michael's family. As they grew desperate for proof of life, the responses from Michael became more biting. When his mother grew gravely ill, the messages remained cold. To maintain the lie, Michael had to be such a jerk that no one would care to look for him. Within months of Michael's supposed departure, Lori began a relationship with Travis Filmer. Filmer testified that Lori told him Michael was, quote, no longer walking this earth, and that something bad had happened. This admission suggests Lori felt a level of security that she would not be caught. The construction of the fire pit and the pouring of the concrete slab became a focal point of this new era. At the trial, Travis Filmer admitted to helping construct this feature, citing practical reasons like a muddy backyard. Yet, the timing was damning. The slab was a seal, a permanent lid placed over the volatile history of the marriage. In December 2016, Lori and Travis held a commitment ceremony on the property. Lori wore a white dress. Travis's grandfather walked her down the aisle. It was a celebration of the new life, held directly over the remains of the old one. The charade collapsed in February 2018. A childhood friend of Michael's requested a well-being check, reporting that no one had heard Michael's voice in 3 years. This was despite getting barraged with odd and aggressive messages from him throughout this entire time. When Lake County deputies arrived, Lori stuck to her script. Michael had left in 2015. She allowed them inside the house, which betrayed no signs of a struggle. However, when deputies asked to search the backyard with a sniffer dog, Lori's cooperation evaporated. At that point, she requested an attorney and shut down completely, proving that there was definitely nothing a dog would find in that backyard. And honestly, it would have been better for her to just not cooperate at all. Being totally willing to deal with investigators until they wanted to sniff around the backyard, literally with a dog, is obviously a very bad look. On March 9, 2018, the sheriff's office returned with a warrant and a team of German Shepherds. A canine from the Brevard County Sheriff's Office alerted on the fire pit area, jumping and digging before sitting down, the signal for decomposition. Deputies broke through the concrete slab. Beneath the earth, they found a blue tarp. As the layers of soil were peeled back, the reality of Michael Shaver's final resting place was revealed. The fire pit was a sarcophagus. The trial of Lori Shaver began in September 2024, 9 years after Michael took his last breath. The state painted Lori as a black widow who killed her husband to start over, using digital impersonation to hide the crime. But the defense, led by attorney Jeffrey Wiggs, chose a strategy almost unheard of in criminal defense: blame the child. I call this the "Who Shot Mr. Burns" defense, and yeah, this is clearly a Hail Mary pass at best. First, the defense dismantled the victim. They painted Michael not as a good-natured Disney technician, but as a violent monster. They argued his disappearance was the result of a violent confrontation gone wrong. The crux of the defense was a claim that sucked the air out of the courtroom. Lori didn't kill Michael. Her daughter Isabel did. The defense theorized that in 2015, Michael was attacking Lori to the point of potentially killing her. Isabel, then 7 years old and quick on the draw, allegedly ran to get a revolver and heroically shot her father to save her mother. The defense further claimed that after the child fired, Lori's ex-lover, a man named Jeremy Townsend, took the gun, fired a second shot to finish him off, and disposed of the body. Isabel Shaver, now 15, walked to the stand and told a harrowing story. She described a chaotic scene where her father was kicking her mother. She claimed Jeremy Townsend was present and fired a second shot. It was a dramatic confession, but the prosecution dismantled it with forensic logic. The medical examiner testified that Michael died from a single gunshot wound to the back of the head. There was no evidence of a second shot. This single fact devastated the defense's two-shooter theory. Prosecutors pointed out that Isabel had been interviewed multiple times over the years and never mentioned shooting her father until the trial. They suggested she had been manipulated or groomed by her mother into taking the fall, knowing that she couldn't be found criminally liable as a 7-year-old. Jeremy Townsend testified for the prosecution, likely under immunity or simply to clear his name. Townsend stated that he didn't even know who Michael was. He denied being at the house, shooting Michael, or burying the body. He testified his relationship with Lori didn't begin until December 2015. Importantly, this was a month after the slaying, making the timeline simply not work. Travis Filmer, the man who married Lori on the slab, was a reluctant witness. He admitted to pouring the concrete but claimed ignorance of what lay beneath. When prosecutors asked why he didn't ask questions when Lori hinted there was something more there, his lack of curiosity painted a picture of willful blindness. He just wasn't a very inquisitive guy, he claimed. The jury was left with two competing realities, with the first being a calculated wife who executed her husband and impersonated him for years. The other potential reality involved a 7-year-old Annie Oakley who saved her mom's life and a boyfriend from the future who solved all her problems. The physical evidence, the single gunshot, the digital deception, the concrete slab, weighed heavily against the defense. On a Friday in September 2024, after approximately 5 hours of deliberation, the jury returned their verdict: guilty. Sentencing occurred on November 25, 2024. Judge Carrie Rada sentenced Lori Shaver to life in prison with no possibility of parole. Lori Shaver is perhaps one of the most evil people I've covered on this channel, given the sheer scope of the psychological damage she inflicted as well. She didn't just kill Michael, she went above and beyond to damage everyone in her orbit, including, most disturbingly, her own daughter. Hey everyone, it's Jimmy here, reminding you to subscribe and hit the notification bell and turn on all those notifications. Also remember to check out the membership option by clicking join or hit the Patreon link in the description. On the evening of March 1st, 2017, a peaceful rural Pennsylvania setting was shattered by a gunshot. 22-year-old Katrina Seaburn, a Clarion University senior, was found fatally shot in her car near Lake Lucy in Washington Township. This is the story of how a young woman's life was cut short and how the investigation, trial, and conviction of her boyfriend, Damian Ditz, eventually brought answers and justice. It started as a routine drive on that early March evening. Katrina Seaburn, a 22-year-old student from Curwensville, sat in the passenger seat of her Suzuki hatchback, while her boyfriend, 22-year-old Damian Ditz, drove. A Glock had been resting on the dashboard since the night before, after the couple had gone on a fishing trip. As they pulled into the parking area of a trailer park near Lake Lucy, a 911 call came in at 5:43 reporting a shooting. First responders arrived to a grim scene. Katrina had been shot once in the chest and was unresponsive. Paramedics couldn't save her. She was pronounced dead at the scene, still buckled in the front passenger seat of her car. Ditz appeared immediately distraught. Witnesses later recounted that he was found outside the vehicle in extreme distress, vomiting and sobbing as emergency personnel arrived. He was even heard screaming that it, quote, should have been me. An apparent raw display of shock and remorse in the moments after the shooting. Aside from the dying victim and Ditz himself, no one else was present. It fell to the Pennsylvania State Police and Clarion County detectives to piece together what had happened between the couple in those fateful minutes. In the immediate aftermath, Ditz told police that the shooting was a bizarre accident. During an interview with the cops on the night of March 1st, he claimed the loaded Roscoe had slid off the dashboard as he made a turn. As it fell, it hit the center console and discharged on its own, striking Katrina square in the chest. Within hours, he changed his story. In a second statement that same night, Ditz said that when the gun slid off the dash, he grabbed for it, and it went off as he caught it. Both versions painted the incident as an unfortunate mishap, with Ditz denying any intent to harm his girlfriend. Despite these explanations, troopers weren't entirely convinced, but they decided not to file charges immediately, pending further analysis of the evidence. Over the next 3 months, investigators dug deeper, and a possible motive emerged. The couple had been arguing over money that day. Katrina had lent Ditz about $1,000 to buy a car, and he had in turn given some of it to a friend, which upset her. Shortly before the shooting, Katrina checked Ditz's bank balance at an ATM and discovered only $9 remaining, a finding that sparked a heated dispute in the car. This ultimately very minor financial feud provided context for why emotions were running high just before the weapon discharged. Katrina and Ditz had dated on and off for about 4 years, so those close to them struggled to fathom how an ordinary disagreement escalated into a deadly incident. On June 20th, 2017, after extensive investigation, state police brought Ditz back in for a polygraph examination and intensive questioning. Confronted with the inconsistencies in his stories and other evidence, Ditz changed his account yet again. He admitted that his previous statements were false. Ditz now confessed that during the argument over the missing cash, he lost his temper and grabbed the weapon in anger. Despite knowing it was loaded, he pointed the Glock at Katrina to intimidate her, and then, without warning, it went off, and the bullet fatally struck her in the chest. Ditz insisted he didn't intentionally pull the trigger, claiming the firearm discharged while he was irresponsibly waving it around. Following this confession, authorities arrested Ditz on criminal homicide and related charges. And I'll just add here that if he had simply stuck to one of his initial stories, it looks like this guy may have actually gotten away with it. Thankfully, Damien was engaging in some nominative determinism and lived up to his Ditz name, being unable to keep his story straight. In December 2018, Damien Ditz went on trial at the Clarion County Courthouse. The proceedings lasted about 1 week and drew intense local interest. Early in the trial, testimony had to be paused when Ditz suffered an apparent panic attack in the courtroom. Once the trial resumed, the core question was clear. Both sides agreed. Ditz fired the gun, but whether it was an accident or not would determine Damien's fate. District Attorney Mark Aaron argued that this shooting was no accident. In his opening statement, he told the jury that by picking up a loaded weapon during a heated argument with a finger on the trigger, Ditz demonstrated an extreme disregard for human life. Such reckless behavior, Aaron contended, amounted to malice. To reinforce a motive, the prosecution recounted the couple's dispute over the money, suggesting that seething anger had overtaken Ditz. The jury was shown surveillance footage from a bank drive-thru earlier that afternoon, where Katrina can be seen checking Ditz's account shortly before the incident. Investigators also presented the physical evidence, the Glock itself and a box of ammunition from the car. A trooper testified that the ammo box had 1 round missing, presumably the bullet that felled Katrina. Additionally, Ditz's cousin, the weapon's owner, testified that the Glock had never malfunctioned in its prior use. This potentially undermined any claim of a spontaneous misfire, though no expert evidence appears to have been led in this regard. The defense maintained that Katrina's death was a tragic accident and nothing more. Defense attorney Adam Bishop acknowledged that Ditz caused the fatal shot, but urged jurors to see it as the result of negligence, not intent. He portrayed Ditz as inexperienced and foolish with firearms, but not a killer. He was a stupid person, not a malicious person. The defense emphasized that Ditz had no reason to deliberately harm the woman he loved. They pointed out that the young couple had shared hopeful plans for the future. They even kept a bucket list of goals like getting engaged and buying a house, and nothing in Ditz's background suggested malice toward Katrina. All evidence of his panic and grief after the incident, they argued, was consistent with someone horrified by his own mistake. The most dramatic testimony came from Ditz himself. Taking the stand in his own defense, he broke down and reiterated that he never meant to do this to Katrina. He admitted he handled the gun recklessly and expressed profound remorse. However, under cross-examination, Ditz had to confront his shifting stories. When pressed about the moment the weapon fired, he ultimately conceded that he had pulled the trigger, an extremely damaging admission that undermined his accident narrative. This acknowledgement gave credence to the prosecution's claim that whatever his regrets afterward, Ditz's actions in that instant were criminally reckless. After closing arguments, the case went to the jury. The prosecutor stressed that waving a loaded gun at someone in anger is not a simple mishap. The defense, in turn, pleaded for jurors to recognize Ditz's lack of intent and genuine remorse, suggesting he should be convicted of involuntary manslaughter at most. The panel of 7 women and 5 men began deliberations, tasked with determining what form of punishment suited this situation. On December 7, 2018, the jury returned its verdict after nearly 4 hours of deliberation. They found Damien Ditz guilty of negligent homicide in the death of Katrina Seaburn. The verdict meant the jurors concluded Ditz acted with malice, that he intentionally or knowingly caused death through his reckless actions. But they stopped short of saying that he committed the act willfully and declined to find him guilty in the first degree. 6 weeks later, on January 23, 2019, Ditz faced his sentencing hearing. A standing-room-only crowd filled the courtroom, including dozens of Katrina's family members and friends wearing Justice for Katrina shirts emblazoned with her photo. Emotions ran high as loved ones spoke. Katrina's mother, Tammy Seaburn, delivered a heart-wrenching statement about the impact of losing her only child. She described Katrina as a gifted student and athlete, a young woman who had excelled in school and was just weeks from graduating college. All of those achievements and future milestones, Tammy noted, were stolen in an instant. She recounted how her life and family were shattered on that day in 2017, and how every day since has been a struggle with grief. Pleading for the maximum punishment, she urged the judge to take a firm stand against violence so that no other mother would have to endure what she has. Ditz, given a chance to speak, sobbed as he apologized and insisted he never wanted to hurt Katrina. Judge James Arner, before announcing the sentence, acknowledged that no outcome could truly compensate for the loss of a life. He then sentenced Damien Ditz to 10 to 20 years in state prison. This punishment ensured that Ditz would spend at least a decade behind bars before being eligible for parole. It was less than the 40-year maximum that Katrina's family had hoped for, but it held Ditz accountable for his actions to a significant degree. The conclusion of the court case brought some closure but little comfort to those who loved Katrina. However, personally, I think the result is about as good as it could have possibly been given the circumstances. If Ditz had simply stuck to his initial story, there would have been little way to disprove it, especially if he went with the second story, where he grabbed the trigger accidentally.